Hi everyone, I'm Seth Henshaw. Welcome back to my YouTube channel where I talk about historic architecture in the United States. This video will examine the history of windows in the United States, primarily sash windows. This is going to be a really quick video. I'm covering a lot of ground, so I'm going to have to move fairly quickly. The history of windows in the United States falls into three general periods. The initial period begins with the introduction of sash windows, which is supposedly 1601, and ends right about the time of the Civil War. So that is about a century and a half. The middle period begins about the time of the Civil War and extends to about 1930, when certain things changed in window production, which leads to the third period, the modern period of windows, which is introduced by the silentite window that was introduced in 1932. Before we start, I would like to point out just a few things about some window basics and basic terms that you need to know. Most sash windows have an upper sash and a lower sash. Some people call these double hung sash windows, which is the most common term. Sometimes, or often actually, especially in the late 1700s, early 1800s, the upper sash was fixed and did not move. That's technically speaking a single hung sash window rather than a double hung sash window. That particular term, single hung sash, was not really common in the United States until really recently. Some historic preservation offices prefer that term, other ones don't recognize that term of single hung sash. If it's a sash window, they consider it to be double hung sash. The terminology for windows is similar to the terminology for doors, because windows have rails and stiles. This particular window has stiles which are on the side, so this is the stile, and the other stile is here. It also has rails. Rails are the horizontal members of the overall frame of the sash. So we have the lower rail. This is called the meeting rail because the upper and lower sashes meet here, and then there's an upper rail. These pieces of wood right here that separate the panes are called muntins, M-U-N-T-I-N. And the shape of the muntin changes regularly through time. The first period of sash windows extends from 1701 until about 1860. During this century and a half, windows experience a linear progression over time, so it's sort of easy to tell when a window was built just on the basis of what it looked like. Colonial sash windows are a continuation of casement windows, which means the panes are a little bit larger, and over time window panes just get bigger and bigger because of changes in the technology of how glass is made. In the colonial and Georgian period, windows have a lot of panes in each sash. They might be 16 over 16, they might be 12 over 12. But a lot of lights. And I'm going to show you in a little chart of how the muntin changed. In the colonial period, the muntin was very thick, and that helped to give the sash a really strong feeling to it. In the federal period, as I showed you, the muntins are a little bit narrower than they were in colonial times. Another thing that happens in the federal period is the introduction of window weights. The purpose of a window weight is to connect the sash of a window to a heavy weight of some kind that might be made of iron or some other metal. I have here a sash weight from about 1855 to give you an idea of what these looked like at that time. In the mid-19th century, these were generally square in section. In the late 19th century, they became cylindrical in shape. You can see that they have the weight here, which is 5.5. The sash weight has to have the same weight as the actual sash, so that raising the sash or lowering the sash will keep it in tension with the sash weight. And the hole here is a place where the cord would originally be attached that would go up and over a pulley and then down along the side of the window. And sashes at that time, especially in the 19th century, had a feature called being plowed and bored. This is a very important idea, and I have an example of this coming up. If you're ever doing a report about a historic house, like a historic structures report, you need to mention if the sashes are plowed and bored. So let's take a look at what that means. This sash comes from the mid-19th century, and it has been plowed and bored. The plowed area is the groove that goes down, and it ends with a round terminus. One end of the cord would be attached here, and the other end would be attached to the top of the window weight. In the second period that I'll be telling you about shortly, chains were introduced that were used to connect the window sashes to the window weights. And I have a chain here. I'll show you what the chain looks like. We're not really sure when window chains were introduced. The first advertisement that I've seen for window chains is from 1882 in the New York Times. They may have been around a little bit before that, but after that they became very common. And generally in the 20th century, the older ropes that had been used were replaced gradually by chains, although some ropes have survived in historic buildings. Now, at the end of the first period, we have the introduction of a window in the 1850s that has two lights in each sash. It's 2 over 2. And this was the result of changes in glass technology, changes in the way glass was produced. The 2 over 2 window was the dominant window of the late 19th century in the United States. Okay, let's look at the second period of sash windows, which extends from roughly 1860 to roughly 1930. The middle period is characterized by 3 important developments that I'm going to go over real quickly here for you. And these 3 developments are the introduction of a different type of sash locks, the introduction of the 1 over 1 window, and experimentation with different types of windows. Let's start with sash locks. I plan to do an entire video about this fairly soon for you because it's a really interesting topic that's not been investigated very well. But I want to give you just really a quick introduction. Sash locks follow into 3 categories depending on where the mechanism is located on the sash. The earliest type of sash lock is located over here, usually, along one of the stiles. These are called side locks. In the middle period, a new type of sash lock became common in the United States, and it's located right here. This type of lock is called a sash fastener, and most of us are familiar with this because of the most common type of sash fastener, which was introduced in the 1890s but is still available today. The third type of sash lock is called a sash lift, and that is always located at the bottom of the lower sash. Sash lifts incorporate 3 different types of hardware. Not all of those types of hardware are actually lifts, but because of where they're located, that's the name of that category, sash lifts. The second item that emerged during the second period is the 1 over 1 window. This is a window that has a single plate glass in the upper and lower sash of a window, which really took over in the United States as the primary type of window, 1 over 1, well throughout the 20th century. And to some degree, the use of a plate glass window in the lower sash is what led to the third development of the second period. The thing about windows of this time that we mostly focus on today are these innovative window types that are often called Queen Anne windows, but they fall into these 5 categories. the marginal window, transom window, bow window, geometric window, and lozenge window. And I'm going to say just a little bit about each one of these. These were introduced first in 1885, which is the marginal window, and all of these had been phased out before the end of this period. The window that we're the most familiar with of these is the marginal window, which is sometimes called the Queen Anne window or a Victorian window. The key feature of this window is that the upper sash has a series of small lights around the edge, which is how it got its name, because at the time they considered this to be lights around the margin of the sash. These windows became common about 1885 and continued in heavy use until the time of World War I. The transom window is the second in this series. This was introduced in 1895 and was common up until about 1920. The transom window had a horizontal upper sash that was undersized and was also fixed. It often had decorative patterns like the one on the left here, or else it had some kind of repeating feature like the one on the right, which has a lozenge pattern, although some of the other window types that I'll be covering here would have applied to this upper sash. Third is the bow window. This was a curved window that would often appear in a rounded part of a building like a turret, and it was mainly built during the years 1900 to 1913. Next is the set of windows called the geometric windows. These windows are characterized by the use of geometric shapes, meaning either squares or diamonds, or else the use of curved muntins, as you see on the right here. These four were generally made between the years 1900 and 1915 and came in a wide variety of different shapes and sizes. The final window in this set is the lozenge window. When looking at a window, a lozenge is the name of a type of pane that's generally rectangular, but it has pointed ends. These lozenge windows always have a small row of triangles at the top and bottom, but they sometimes have these diamonds in between the triangles and the lozenges, as you see in the window on the left and the one in the middle. The silent tight window was invented in 1932 by the Curtis Company in Iowa. This window introduces the third period of windows in the United States. Curtis used special weather stripping along the stiles to create an airtight window. It's possible to tell if a window is a silent tight window because of this spring. The silent tight window had the spring extending down and attached to the lower corners of the window sash. And the purpose of the spring is it eliminated the need to have window weights. And the silent tight window introduced a series of experimentations by different millwork companies to try to produce more energy efficient windows, which extends throughout this third period of windows. The next development in this period is the introduction of the picture window. All millwork companies in 1946 began to carry picture windows in their catalogs, and this is a typical picture window from 1946 I'm showing you here. Picture windows came in a variety of sizes and shapes. Some of these are called window walls because they consist of a bunch of smaller windows that create a bigger window unit. One of the things that happens with picture windows also is the way that we describe sashes changed. So for example, this picture window has a sash on either side with two lights in the upper and the lower sash. Before this period, these were called four-light windows, but beginning especially around 1955, these windows are called 2/2 windows pretty consistently by millwork companies. The next important development was an introduction by Pella in 1958 of snap-in muntins. The importance of this is that the production of windows took a lot of time and was kind of expensive because of all these small panes. And so Pella came up with this idea, why not have the muntins be something that could be removable so it would be cheaper to produce, and it's also easier to clean. This led to some other experimentation, as some people wanted to have the snap-in muntins on the exterior, which is called simulated divided lights because it's not really a divided light window. Although in the 1980s, some window companies began to produce what they call true divided lights. In the 1970s, millwork companies placed an increasing emphasis upon energy-efficient windows. And at this time, different types of windows started to replace the double-hung sash. One of them is the slider window, which we see here. This is a type of window that had existed in the 1700s, but had mostly dropped out of production. Other types of windows include casement windows, which again had existed prior to this time. And usually the casement windows of this period are operated with a crank. Another thing about modern windows is that the millwork companies began using new materials instead of wood that are intended to last longer than a wood window. And three of the most common materials that they use for windows are aluminum, vinyl, and fiberglass. This is the end of my brief introduction to windows in the United States. I hope that you found this interesting, and if you have, I invite you to subscribe, or if you'd like to, you could leave a message below in the comments.